Okay, so here you are with a brand new NEW-Carve CNC with a HGH15 upgraded Z carriage. So you can have some, lots of nice power matching sliders with your Z slider. It's just really nice, heavy duty. I really like this slider here. But here you are, you're ready to install the PwnCNC bracketing for it. Let me describe a couple of the components and then we'll jump into actually installing it. So we've got your support arms. More than likely you've got the universal support arms. These are the ones with the ankle bolt that goes through it and holds the bottom of it, and of course comes up and yeah. And then of course you've got a couple of tracks. These are just simple track brackets. Always remember that the holes along the side are on the outside whenever you go to mount them. You've got the rear piece that holds the whole assembly together. We have a little support, another brace. So this is one brace. This is our secondary brace. It basically sits right here and reaches down and holds onto a couple of screws at the bottom of the NEW-Carve carriage here. Keep the whole assembly from moving around. You'll see more of that here in just a second. You've got a couple of front-facing ears. These are the ear pieces that sit right on the front. The SM should always be pointing forward. It means speed mount. Eventually I'll have some more accessories for that. You should have several or four of these, I believe these are M5 by 30 or 35, I forget. It's enough to reach through all of the pieces that make up this assembly. You may or may not have a couple of M4 screws. Yeah, I think these are M4 screws. But they won't be needed for this particular installation. That's for folks with the NEW-Carve with a standard carriage. But you'll also have a couple of your thumb screws with your steel nut plates here. You will need a 3mm hex driver for this installation. And of course, we're going into, you're not threading any plastic in this case. You're just going straight into a heat insert, not the ones on these ones, but on the ones on these ones. Here we go. A couple of M5 locking nuts that are embedded. I press them into the back piece here. So with no further ado, let's bring you around to another corner and I'll show you a close-up of the back of the carriage and how we're going to install this. All right, here we are with the back of the carriage. And of course, you will need to, the first step, of course, is you will need to unscrew your wiring block. One of the pieces actually has to come in here, and that's what this little guy here is. It comes in underneath these screws, and this wiring block basically blocks that from happening. Now be careful whenever you pull it off. This is just cheap plastic, so the temperature changes and that sort of thing may have made it fragile like it did mine, and I literally just snapped right off the wiring block. I'll have to figure out how to get a new one, or I'm sure Amazon's got those that looks like a pretty generic piece. But I'm going to move that out of the way. We're going to take this funky looking brace with the thin piece here. That thin piece, face it where the R and the L are facing the front of the machine. I'm going to set that right down onto the plate, slide it in underneath these two M5 bolts here, and that's it. We're then going to take the solid brace. This is the big long brace, thick the whole way through. And again, R and L facing forward. And now, I should mention, there's an R and L on the back too. Just make sure R is on the right side, L is on the left side, and it matches the way you install this. Oh, and one other note, there's a little ledge here. This ledge should come up and over top of this piece here. So slides right under there. This piece here, you'll notice that there are 4 hole inserts. Ignore these. These are for NEW-Carve folks with a stock Z, but they're recessed. The recessed part is facing backwards. The flush part is facing forwards. So we're going to slide that right on top of that vertical X carriage piece there. Just kind of line it up loosely. That's okay. The next thing we're going to take is the right earpiece. Now the right earpiece, again, the SM faces forward. And of course we're going to take our bracket, or our track bracket here, the holes towards the outside, put it right up against there. we will not be using these two nuts. Just ignore those. We're going to be passing through the other two. So here, give me just a second. I'm going to put, so if I, sitting this way, if I turn it this way so you can see it, the top left and the bottom right just slips right through. You slide those through, slide it in through the corresponding holes through both pieces, and you should bump right into the locking nuts on the back. So go ahead and start threading it in. Don't tighten it all the way down to its final torque. Just kind of tighten it down till it's kind of, you know, doesn't wiggle around quite as much. We want all four of these pieces to be nicely tight and sandwiched together eventually. But for now, just make sure they're loosely sandwiched together. See, it kind of still kind of moves. We're going to tighten it down to its final torque here in a minute, because we're going to reverse it and go over to the other side and basically do the exact same thing. All right, here we are at a slightly different angle, more forward facing, so you can see what's going on in the front. But here we are on the left side, again, tracks away from this, or the holes, away from the center of the carriage here. Take our left earpiece, SM facing forward, track bracket, set it right on there, and on this side we're going top right, bottom left. Once those are through, kind of slide it through the other two, the corresponding holes here on the back. You may need to bump your assembly back over to the left here a bit. Basically the track bracket will sit right up against your HGH15 here. And we're going to tighten that down just so it's just barely sandwiched together. The goal here, the ultimate goal of these bracketing, of these brackets, of this bracket assembly and all that stuff, depending on the CNC machine and all, is basically to hold these tracks in the perfect position so that we can mount our arms to it. So we've got it in there, we've got it nice, it's not moving anywhere. The tracks, now we can tighten it down to the final torque. It doesn't really matter the order. If you have a suggested order, leave it in the comments or the sections on YouTube or something. I'm always looking to improve. And there we go. Got final torque. It doesn't need to be too tight. Just needs to be nice and tight. We don't want these tracks moving around. If it moves around, you know, if you can force it probably about 2 or 3 millimeters, but that is perfectly sufficient. That gives a little bit of buffer flexibility to the bracketing. You can tighten it down just a tiny bit more. Just remember you're sandwiching all this together. So there we go. There. Now, that's not going anywhere. We're going to take, I'm going to show you on this side. You can go ahead and repeat the process on the left side on your own, but I'm going to take the arm, drop my thumb screw through it, grab my nut plate, slide that from behind, kind of slide that, get that right into that track and kind of hold a finger up against it. Now, the nice things about these new thumb screw, version 2 thumb screws is they're super long and go really deep into this nut plate. So there's plenty of material for it to grab into. So you can hold the support arm sideways if you wanted. I'm going to drop this down just before, slide it right into the track. Oop, I didn't slide it the other way. There we go. Now we're good to go. That is ready to up and down. You're ready to go. I do want to leave you with one final thought. I do have this extra piece on the web store. You might be interested in it. It's not required, but the catch is you got to remember to raise your arm up, or your support arms up, before you home your machine, or the support arm will basically be broken right in, damaged, because it slides right up against here and homes really close to the machine. What I've come up with is a little pinching device here. It pinches right onto the rails, holds on with a single screw, grabs right onto this linear rail, and triggers the homing switch as it's coming over here to the left. Now here's the big catch. The big catch is if you adjust your homing position you're going to reduce the width of your cutting area. Now, you can always remove this, rehome your machine to increase that area. But if you're like me and you don't really use the full capacity every single time you do a cut, you may just want to limit your X travel a little bit. And I will go in another video that explains this a little further. Talks about the going in and configuring the G code for adjusting. I'll talk about that later in another video. It's actually rather interesting. I've done quite a bit of playing around with the areas, the G code that controls your machine, the width, the depth, the height, and all that stuff. And it's actually a lot easier than you think. And this little guy has a lot to do with that because it's reducing the size of your machine. So, but it does prevent you from damaging it if you're only using mostly in the middle area anyways. So yeah, hope that was helpful. As always, don't just own your CNC, dominate it.